We have slides. There we go. To his wife before the Battle of Gettysburg, a Confederate soldier from Mount Pleasant, North Carolina, wrote, "It done me a great deal of good to read your letter and to hear that my two little darlings, Georgie and Johnny, keeps well. You tell them that Papa would like to see his two little boys. Dear wife, bear my absent days from you with patience. Put your trust in the Almighty God, for he has promised that he will give a crown of glory and eternal life unto all that will come unto him and believe in his holy name. Dear wife, look to God for protection and believe in him, for if it should be his will that we never should meet each other any more in this world, that we may meet each other in heaven, where parting will be no more, and there will be no more wars or rumors of wars." As part of the ill-advised Pickett's charge, well, no, that's not Pickett's charge. There we go. As part of the ill-advised Pickett's charge, Morgan Alexander Walker's leg was shot off at the hip at Gettysburg. He didn't die, not right away, but like so many, he got gangrene, and trying to get home and see those two little boys, he died in a hospital in Richmond after his premonition that he in fact would not make it home. His boys were ages 3 and 1 at that time. That 1-year-old was my great-grandfather. Yes, I found that letter in some of my mother's keepsake files after she died about 1.5 years ago. But there's more, and it's not pretty, and it's not easy. The letter continues, "If I don't return, dear wife, I want you to sell 2 of the 6 horses and take the $250 we had stashed away and go to Concord and buy a colored man who can work on the farm." And she did. While I denounce the evils of slavery, it's easy to do, it seems obvious. I am, it seems, a case study in privilege that has its source in the most shameful of legacies. I'm sorry. I want to do better. I want to be more aware. I want to be more justice-oriented. I want to be more reconciling. But there's no question that I am the product and the living embodiment of privilege. No matter how hard I've worked, because that's your first line of defense. But I did this and I did this. I didn't do that. Those were my ancestors. Or whatever gifts I have, I carry with me in ways that I can't even be aware, because that's the nature of privilege, unless we're somehow in this together and accountable to one another. I carry in me systemic racism, patriarchy, oppression. Finger pointing does no good. I don't like it, and I know you don't, if it's pointed toward me. Accusing you statements. So I pray that you will simply kindly accept my I statement today, that though there has been and will continue to be much resistance and spin and narrative, I know that privilege exists because I'm it. I hope you'll accept my commitment not only to be aware, but to try to do better, not in lockstep with some political platform or agenda, but in pursuit of being more like Jesus. Because in my best self, privilege and all, that's still what I want to be. That's what I feel called to be. Jesus, who was always acting and speaking in behalf of those on the margins, speaking truth to power, acting truth to power. And yes, privilege, though perhaps they didn't have that particular language, just like the ancient prophets, that Jesus not just to individuals, but to systems. Religious, political, cultural, to embrace all in the overwhelming forgiveness and dignity and value and power of God's great love that knows no boundaries, that knows no distinctions. We get our commission, I hope, our conviction from Jesus. I'm here as proof that privilege exists. But I'm also not only committed to doing better, but as bishop, to our doing better as a church. It's pretty ugly out there sometimes when it comes to privilege and racism. It simply is. Our Synod Council, following the ELCA Assembly mandate from 3 years ago, 2016, has required that all of our North Carolina Synod rostered ministers and as many of our lay leaders as possible take the Transforming White Privilege training in our Synod that is available to all of us. We've had the first round. It's an amazing thing. It's a hard thing to engage together and be kind with such deeply hurt feelings across so many realities. But it's something that I'm having to tell you again in my I statement has been and is being, as I learn more about even myself, what's happening in the world. So I pray that you'll pay attention, that even if you have hesitation and disagreement, even if you believe that we made this up, I'm saying for the sake of the church, would you have the conversation? Would you open yourself up? I have to tell you, I can't help but wonder, and I guess also hope and pray, that old great-great-grandpa Walker, I can't help but wonder what he thinks now, assuming he was right in all of his flowery language about faith and that he did in fact end up in heaven and in so doing has seen the light, that even he is smiling right now as here in the North Carolina Synod, not that his great-great-grandson is a Lutheran or a bishop, but that in his synod and his church, in which he was already the fifth-generation Lutheran, that we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of the ordination of African-American women here in this place. Pastor Earlene Miller, who served Prince of Peace here in Greensboro. Is that not awesome? Who knew, Grandpa? You didn't. And I don't, but I'm learning and I'm trying. And I want you to try with me to do the very best we can. Again, not some political slant, because we'll get caught way in the weeds on that, people, but Jesus. Work our hands. And so we're always about the work of grace and inclusion and forgiveness and reconciliation, and with that, transformation. Yeah? Can we be about that? So a change of topic, though only somewhat. A huge part of the past year has been a discussion, and that might be not the appropriate word, of the plight and opportunity of women in ministry. Have you all been following lately what women of the ELCA have been up to? I'd like to share a little bit with you. Here are 18 bishops. That's what women of the ELCA are up to. And we... Not a one of them elected because they were female, but because they're incredibly awesome people on whom the Spirit landed and said, let's do this. And this year already, there's another net gain, not because it's about some quota system at its core, but to say that we're moving into a different sort of a way. In North Carolina, however, the reasons that we're having these conversations is because we haven't been pretty there either. We've got all kinds of deficit there, and we have all kinds of opportunity, and we're continuing to do that. There's another whole section in this assembly about that, so I won't steal all the thunder, but I do want to say that all of the bishops, all of the bishops in Region 9 got together, and we'll get together again, which that just doesn't happen. It was the first time I'd ever been in the same place with all of the bishops from Region 9 at the same time. So this is a priority for us to talk about how we can be more equitable as a church and lift up the gifts of more than half of our folks, and that is our sisters in ministry. You maybe heard how it kind of precipitated from a Seriously video that we'll talk about a little bit more. All right, let me just switch gears for a little bit. Hurricane Florence relief has been a big focus of our synod since last September. I myself have been on numerous multi-day trips to east of I-95 since then. Joreen Jones and Phil Tonneson from our staff have done similar sorts of things. That's St. Andrews and New Bern, where you saw on all the news channels with the worst, where the storm just sat, 30 to 36 inches of rain. That was the Lutheran Disaster Response trailer and the Lutheran Men in Mission trailer that was there. They haven't been able to use their worship space. This was really different. We've had hurricanes before, and we've had families, congregational members severely affected, but in this one, but they help as they should, and as we're partnering with them in humanitarian kind of needs. They don't fix church buildings. And so what do you do in your congregation? And we talked about, boilers, that's one thing, and it's very real, but if you just suddenly have a few $100,000 you hadn't counted on, and yes, you have insurance, but your deductible is $145,000 or any number of things like that. So there's amazing things going on. There in New Bern, they haven't been able to worship in their worship space because of all the mold that has been there. We in the North Carolina Synod, as well as some of the other synods, mainly through bishops' discretionary funds and from congregational contributions, some of which, maybe most of which, were sent directly to congregations in the East. So we don't even know about them, but what we know about is we sent about $150,000 in grant money to these congregations and said, use them for what you need. I mean, it's not going to get you there, but at least maybe you won't feel alone, so that you can feel like we're partnering with you in trying to help you put your lives back together. There at St. Andrews in New Bern, I think it was 16 families who entirely lost their homes. Last time I was there, which was not that long ago, most of those folks still didn't have a FEMA trailer, and they were living with other members of the congregation. I mean, they lost their home, not like, let's fix it up. I mean, it's gone. So in March, we co-sponsored with Lutheran Disaster Response and Lutheran Services Carolinas, which also does a lot of disaster response work, a respite retreat for all pastors and spouses and lay leaders and spouses. We held it in Raleigh. Worship, information, rest, encouragement, support, blessing were the order of the weekend, and it indeed was a huge blessing. And Joreen helped us put that together. This is the worship service on the last day as we gathered there together to try to support one another during the middle of Lent. Our pastors and our lay leaders are worn out, folks. If you wanted to do something kind of cool, call somebody you know down east and say, why don't you take an extra day off and I'll come preach for you. I'll take one of my days, or maybe my congregation will give me a day, and I'll come and lead worship for you. So we were blessed in 2018 not only for the first time in years to be substantially ahead in mission support. I mean, that is just awesome. It's not about the money, right? But money is that stored servanthood so that we can release that as our stewardship in the very best ways we can, in ways that God is calling us to do. I mean, we were way ahead. And again, some people say, well, don't tell people that. Then they won't send you any more. But we have lots to do, and we're very intentional about sharing when we're down in a season. And when we're up in a season, I think we rejoice together in that. And we wanted to say thank you, and we can't say it enough. Because it's not about some offices in Salisbury. It's about the ministry and the work that we do together. That's what this is about. But even in addition to all of that mission support, which was, I'm talking a couple $100,000 more than we had budgeted and that we needed for those needs. But you saw what we could do. Oh, those that we cut several years ago, way back, let's bump them up, right? That's a good feeling. But we also received at least 4 major grants that help us to do things we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. I'm looking over here at Pastor Danielle Denise because she wrote several of them, and looking at Jo Ream because she wrote the one with Lutheran Disaster Response for us to be able to do that. In fact, the one with Jo Ream enabled us to, with the Lutheran Disaster Response church-wide organization, to bring her on board 15 hours a week just to work in Lutheran disaster response. And that's such a blessing for a couple of years. It's not like the Lutherans show up late and stay long. We're not the flashy ones that you see on the news because the cameras have already gone when we get there. But we stay and we help rebuild lives. So we're grateful for that. In December, we received, let me back up a little bit and say, we've been talking about vital congregations. The ELCA gave us an $80,000 grant in conjunction with Lutheran Services Carolinas to work on leadership, one of our top priorities. Lutheran Services Carolinas, Ted Goins, and we were saying, hey, we have a huge issue because almost every time somebody starts a new call, what got them into that call isn't going to sustain them through that call. Because they're moving into a different unknown sort of a place. How do we prepare them, especially if it's bigger, more complex, multi-staff and all that sort of thing? And Ted Goins said, well, we have that in our nursing homes. Somebody's a hall supervisor and they become the nursing supervisor for the whole place, and suddenly, they're frustrated, we're frustrated, and we just don't know how to do this. And so we're sitting down together to talk about how we can, especially in the times of transition, continue to equip our leaders in ways that will help them to be working with all of us in vital congregations. You've already heard in the grant from the Holy Innovations Pool of the ELCA, we were able to bring on board half-time with us, Pastor C.C. Mills, who's such a blessing. I appreciate C.C. so much and been trying to figure out a way to get her to work with us ever since I got here. So I'm pleased that we're able to do that. But this whole thing, we've been calling it yoking. You could call it sharing a pastor or whatever. It takes time, and so it's not something that you just go float, right? It's something that takes time and walking with people. Cece's so relational and direct in the kindest way of direct that I've ever known anybody, to be able to just help move things along. So we're so grateful to the ELCA for sharing those resources so we could bring her on for 2 years to do that. In December, we got a grant that followed our Seriously video, and again, you'll hear more about that later on, things that we're addressing in this church as we lift up our sisters in ministry, as we fight sexism and prepare to celebrate next year the 50th anniversary of the ordination of women in the ELCA, which is a pretty major thing. Apart from grants, we spent more than a year on constitutional revisions, riveting, yes, and we'll be looking more closely at all of that. But part of what we're about is infrastructure, because the rules by which we, operate. So if somebody says to me, well, why do I have to go to my spring conference meeting? I hate my spring conference meeting. Then nothing happens there. It's a terrible thing. Nobody shows up. Nobody knows what's happening. And the best I can say is because the Constitution says you have to. And when you got ordained, I ask you in front of Mama and everybody else if you would uphold the Constitution of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Well, okay, that's all true, right? But is that compelling? No, it's not. And so let's fix the rules to say, let's do this a different way that's a little less institutional and a little more life-giving. We'll just probably, I know, end up with a different kind of institution, but let's hope in the meantime we get some vitality out of it, okay? We continue to grow in social justice and advocacy ministry. This year, Joe pulled together and helped lead a very successful North Carolina Legislative Advocacy Days, and we had close to a dozen congregations from throughout the state represented, helped us visit legislators to advocate for affordable housing in North Carolina. We did that on purpose. because it's a huge need that we found out, especially after the hurricanes, but also because it's one of the few things that's not like ultra controversial. Who's going to say, well, no, I don't think people should have somewhere to live? If they think that, they don't say that anywhere close to an election. So that was really a great day when we were able to come together and do those things. 3 priests walked into a bar. In late March, we gathered in Salisbury for the renewal of the Lutheran Roman Catholic Covenant. We were at Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Salisbury and recommitted to working in North Carolina with our Catholic sisters and brothers. Bishop Zarama mentioned that in the letter that I read a little bit of to you today. And so we're really excited about that. I also wanted you to know that for the first time ever, the North Carolina Synod is hosting North Carolina Region 9 Bishop School. It doesn't mean you're studying to be a bishop. But it means that a bishop is there, and so I and Tammy Jones-West and Dr. Mindy Maycant and others will be helping lead that. So we're excited about that. Just wanted to make sure you knew that it was there. It's maybe possible, if you really, really say pretty please and everything else, that if you have a high schooler who might want to be at that at the end of June for about 5 days, that you can talk to Tammy. I don't know that she can get you in, but if you're really just burning with passion about it, she might have pity and make it happen. So, wanted to also just lift up and reiterate what has been brought to our attention at Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary. Some of the changes there, and it's been changes for quite some time, changes maybe beyond our control in a lot of ways, in declining enrollment, changing church structure, the merger that was a necessity. I promise you was a necessity, a merger with somebody at least, that for them to be able to stay open, and then the wonderful work of Dr. David Radke in this last little bit of time, and then they're moving toward having someone on site. And though they had to take one of our star pastors from Good Shepherd in Brevard, she didn't leave us. Dr. Mary Hinkle-Shore did not leave us. She just went to do ministry in a different context with us and for us. This whole thing about tuition and all the other expenses with the landscape of congregations struggling to pay pastors and everything else, rising debt, lower salaries, you do the math, right? Over time, that's not going to go very well. So one of the things we want to do is not have the debt to begin with. This Opening Doors campaign, it's in the congregational phase now. We're about 3/4 of the way to the $2 million goal. And I say we, it's a Southern Seminary campaign. But in your congregations, if there's a way that you can share with that, if you've got some abundance like we ended up with that we weren't expecting in the North Carolina Synod this year, that's a place that could, and we would encourage you to think about helping to put that. So there's Southern Seminary, one of their buildings that you have there. That's the Synod office. I just wanted to say that one of the things for the last couple of years, because we had a surplus the year before too, just not nearly as big, and we were thinking about leaving the Synod office because it just didn't seem like the best stewardship. The building is getting close to 30 years old, and a lot of things were broken. I don't know if it had been painted. I don't know if it had been recarpeted. Perhaps it had, but nobody could remember that it had. We did those things. We upgraded technology, the Wi-Fi signal. We're just in time probably getting a projector when projectors will probably go away for some other technology. Cutting edge we are. Just fixing the parking lot, fixing the ceiling and revarnishing, lots of different things that we've been able to do. All new LED lighting mainly for stewardship of energy's sake, not just for money, but for the sake of the world, the planet. And so it looks like with that investment, that set of investments, that we're probably going to be centered there, at least for a few more years. So wanted to share that with you. This was a youth gathering year this past year. It was well attended. It was somewhat controversial. I don't remember ever having been to a youth gathering that wasn't somewhat controversial, including the one in 1963. Was that when it was, the National Luther League Convention? No, it wasn't 63. It was earlier than that, maybe 60, when the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the keynoter and was the only African American person in the room. His speechwriters say that and the people that worked with him and accompanied him say that that particular speech was certainly in his top 5, in their opinion, that he ever gave. You can go and listen to it online. But it was really amazing, the youth gathering. And did I even like everything about it? No, I did not. But look, this is not all about me. It's about being the church together, and the stuff that I even struggle with. I'm like, look, if we struggle with it, let's talk about it, and let's do it with our youth people and our pastors, and sit down at night when we're, kind of processing the day, because they're surely going to deal with these issues, when they move away from home and join the military or get a job or go to college or whatever it is that they're going to do. So if they're going to deal with these issues, let's process it in the context of our faith with the relationships with which we're already blessed. So as you can see, we have a big synod with some big things on it, and we don't let Pastor Danielle order the maps anymore. We only had one wall in the whole building where it would go, so we put it there, but we can see it. Every one of your congregations is on there. You just aren't zeroed in enough. Well, and lastly, people ask me how I'm doing, which I really appreciate. Some people say that perhaps I've really aged a lot in the last 4 years. I don't really feel that much different. Anyway, it's really a blessing to be entrusted with this role as bishop. I'm to the point where I can't, it's been 4 years, I can't really pretend much anymore. I am who I am. I say what I think, sometimes wrong and seldom in doubt. And that's just how kind of it goes. I'm trying to walk with this synod as best I can. We're all busy, right? People worry that I'm busy, and I appreciate that, and I do covet your prayers. I pray for you. But there's good busy and there's bad busy, and what we're trying to be about as most we can in our synodical expression of the church, in partnership with all of you who are the synod, is to be about the busy that matters. Even the tired that matters, because tired's not a bad thing if it matters. I'll be tired for you if it's not just all about institutionalism and preservation and this and that. But if we're about this transformation stuff where we started, that's good stuff. So thanks be to God, and thank you for sharing this ministry time with me.